boyfriend. For how long? 2 years? What happened?
It's shit.
What?
Chris, you're the worst. You're literally the worst, Chris. I don't know.
It's whimsical John Williams atop Tom Hanks eating salad and saying what we believe to be eat shit over and over again. That's the magic of cinema right there, isn't it?
It kind of defines the whole movie, the term. That's what it really does. The whole thing.
It does.
Oh my gosh. What are we doing? I'm gonna do the intro first, and we'll talk about the cycle. This is Film Trace, a podcast where we trace the life of a film from production to conception. Oh wait, no, conception to production, all the way to release and reception. Close enough.
I think maybe both these movies might have been a little bit of production before the conception, but we'll get to that.
What are we doing? Second cycle or second episode of the Stranger Than Fiction cycle. Movies that are based or inspired by true stories. This week we're doing Bronson, which came out 2008, and then Terminal, which came out in 2004. We do have a special guest, Katey Stoetzel. Is that right? Is that how I say your last name?
It's Stoetzel.
Okay, perfect. Give us a little intro about you and your writing and your podcast stuff.
So my name is Katey Stoetzel. Easy way to remember how it's pronounced is that it rhymes with pretzel. So
perfect.
We'll never forget it after that. I am the co-founder and TV editor for InBetweenDrafts.com, which is a super new website that started last October. We have a newsletter. We cover film, TV, music, video games, books. And we have a whole podcast section. So there's a bunch of other podcasts on there. So you can go check that out and listen. I'm the host of 2 of them. So just one of them is specifically House of the Dragon after show podcast, and then just a general TV one. But yeah.
Did you do anything for Last of Us?
Yeah, we just did an episode for our podcast. The podcast is called Between TV, and my co-host and I usually talk about what's the biggest thing in TV for that month. And we just did The Last of Us, although we recorded it before the finale, but we talked about the first 8 episodes. So
what did you think about it so far?
Oh, here we go, Dan.
Just a quick take from Katey. I just want to know.
He's obsessed.
I was really excited about it, and I'm not sure if it lived up to. Oh. This is hard.
Ding 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 ding. No, I'm with Katey on this one.
You can listen to the podcast where I kind of go into this a little bit deeper, but I think it was mostly just apocalypse fatigue on my part. I did.
Yep.
As the season went on, I enjoyed it more, but it was not. It did. I don't know.
You faded a bit.
You came to it with your biases, Dan, as obsessed with the video game.
I've just started to replay it, by the way, and the game's amazing.
Okay.
It's a masterpiece. All right, let's dive into this. What are we talking about? These are your picks, Chris. So defend yourself.
Okay, so I was honestly going back and forth about which film to be our main feature and which to be our chaser afterwards. Between these two, we are going to start with Nicolas Winding Refn's Bronson, his second feature, the one that came right before, probably his most famous feature, and probably he's never going to live up to it again in his career, Drive, right? Starring Ryan Gosling. But before that, he had Tom Hardy front and center for this take on the story of, quote, Britain's most notorious inmate, prisoner that essentially had a very kind of theatrical personality and also seemed to have no desire to leave prison and seemed to not be left completely unaffected by any attempts to try to constrain him or punish him within prison. Even so, going so far as to be, to my knowledge and the internet's cursory research knowledge, the only solitary confinement inmate to be relegated to an actual cage in which he could not move more than a few inches in any direction. So as could be surmised without any additional info, like he kind of loses his mind throughout the course of his imprisonment. And probably the most interesting aspect of that imprisonment is that both in and out of being imprisoned, he never murdered anybody. He definitely was violent.
Which, by the way, I got to bring this up because this is said multiple times in all of this this literature about him. And I was like, why is that an important point? I just want to why is that? Like he commits so much violence against people, and like so many terrible things, but the fact that he doesn't kill somebody outright comes up over and over again. I don't want to sidetrack us, just throwing that out there as a little counterpoint.
Well, have you ever read Batman or Superman, Dan?
Yes, I have.
I'm just kidding.
But, okay, before we dive into it, we gotta do background on Refn and on Bronson.
Yes,
the movie. Katey, had you seen this before?
I have not, or I had not, and I had not seen either of these films for today, so Amazing. I'm fresh off of my first watch of them. So no.
Did you have you watched a lot of Refn's work, like Drive? What else did he do?
Only God Forgives.
I had seen Drive a long time ago. I think that was my only experience with this director. But when
go ahead.
Oh, I told one of my friends that I was watching Bronson, and she was like, "Oh, I love that film," and then like took a pause and then was like, "I don't know what that says about me."
That sounds about right. So it's just about right. I think I've only seen Drive and now this. I haven't seen anything else that he's done. I haven't seen Only God Forgives. I just remember the reaction being insane when that movie came out. Right. And I kind of avoided it. Chris, what's your background on this one?
Yeah, no, I was all about Refn's kind of catapult to indie fame. I totally forgot that in between Bronson and Drive is Valhalla Rising, which I have not seen yet.
Yeah, I haven't seen that either.
But would like to now that I have kind of reintroduced myself to his filmography through rewatching Bronson, because after Drive, I was ready to go to press play on Only God Forgives and hyped, and it's a dreadful film. It's one of the worst of that decade, and the next one isn't that much better. He put out Neon Demon in 2016.
I didn't see that one at all. That's cool.
Well, that's the thing with him. All his movies look cool. But I had no idea that he had a movie in 2019 called Too Old to Die Young with Miles Teller.
Oh God, never even heard of that.
Oh no, it's a mini series, not a film.
Oh, okay, like a limited series thing. All right, interesting.
Yeah. But I had seen Bronson. It had a pretty long Netflix run while Drive was out, and I had seen Drive in the theaters, and I was definitely all about not only the aesthetic and soundtrack, but I thought it was a classic example that is almost like played out by now of this deconstruction of like the film bro type of thing, where it's like you have a group of people that see it for what I think it is, this kind of like deconstruction of genre and toxic masculinity, but then it's very easily also playable as something that is just enjoyed and celebrated by the same people that think like Skylar White is an awful person in Breaking Bad, right?
There's so many minefields in that.
Yes. Well, and that's the thing is like he's a minefield director, and he's not afraid of it for better or worse.
No, of course not. I mean, honestly had no idea what this movie was about. I didn't know Refn had even directed it until I started to watch it. I was like, well, wait a second. This is really bizarre. Yeah. I thought it was going to be this like some sort of like biopic, and then it turns out to be this. Would be called experimental. Is it like at least experimental on like the narrative side of things? Yeah,
formally experimental. Yeah.
And you dive into it, and it's like, it's got this amazing sort of style. Tom Hardy, had he really done anything before this? Like, I think he did a little bit acting. This got to be one of his breakout roles, right?
Yeah, it's definitely one of his breakout roles stateside. He was on the show Peaky Blinders. Well, that was after.
It was after, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, he was
like, I'm thinking like Inception. I'm thinking like Dark Knight Rises. That's all like 2010, 2012.
Right. Okay. I got it. He was, he had a bit part in Star Trek Nemesis, the last of the Next Generation Star Trek movies. And then also in Guy Ritchie's Rock'n'Rolla, which I guess was technically his breakout hit, but that one wasn't very big at all. I remember that on the shelves at Blockbuster, not anybody actually watching it.
No. Where do we want to begin with this? Katey, I want to know your initial thoughts on the film. After you watch it, what's the first thing you're feeling when you saw this thing?
Okay, I think stylistically, I liked it a lot. The story itself, I'm not sure. I think I was a little confused on the timeline of everything. That was my biggest gripe, because just reading the synopsis going into it, I think I was waiting for the moment when he was like put in solitary confinement, and I felt, I don't know, I kept waiting for that. I think going in, I was like, okay, so we're just gonna watch Tom Hardy alone in a room the whole movie. And so I was sort of thinking, I was waiting for that moment, and then it didn't really come. And then like a bunch of years passed. I don't know. I got lost a little in like the narrative timeline of stuff. But stylistically, and like, I really loved it. And the way that Tom Hardy, like every time we went to him on the stage and talking to that audience, I loved all of that.
Yeah. That's kind of a make it or break it, I think, for the movie. Either you're on board with those kind of breaks from reality, and also arguably the timeline too. I think that while that's a completely fair criticism of like the structure of the movie, and it's definitely like one of the aspects of production is that Refn is constantly rewriting, and you could say it's overwritten. It hits me differently than most of those prison dramas, whether they're based on a true story or not, because it actually like forces you into that kind of mindset of like, I can't imagine that Bronson himself, or Michael Peterson, his real name, felt like he had a grasp on time after a while, right?
Yeah, I'm sure he kind of felt like when you're in like that, he's in for like what, 30 years?
Yeah, 34. Yeah,
34 years, and 30 of that in solitary confinement. But yeah, to Katie's point, like the solitary confinement part, I guess it's like, yeah, I couldn't really pick out those moments in the movie because he always feels like he's in some sort of prison cell. But maybe I don't know enough about prison. What's the difference between solitary confinement and versus like being in jail? Is it just like you're in like a small little room alone?
I've always thought it was.
That's what I thought it was too. And like with this one, I don't know, maybe I'm misremembering it a bit, but it always feels like he's in kind of like some sort of normal cell, or he's in like the mental institution, and stuff like that. It is, I think more than anything, it's probably the intention of Refn and Tom Hardy, who knew the guy decently well, the real guy, and met with him and talked with him. You know, I think there's definitely an intention there to create a scrambled narrative to reflect what this man went through. I have the hardest time with this movie because, the focus, and this is definitely a minefield. The focus is on this person who, does some really terrible things to a lot of different people. And we're supposed to dive into his psyche and try and understand him. I think that's the intention, or at least represent how this person has dealt with their own behavior and, trauma to some degree, and the trauma they've inflicted on many other people by creating this fictional character, Charles Bronson, who's actually a reflection of an actual action star in America. But then there's no actual connection to him whatsoever. It's just a name that his fight promoter gives him. This feels so like Refn to do this. He is trying to depict something that is nuanced and layered, and he kind of chooses the throw the spaghetti at the wall technique to me. And it's sort of like, yeah, that's stylistically, yes, 100%. It is a fascinating movie. Thomas Hardy's performance is, I think, pretty phenomenal. Yeah. Outside of that, God, it's tough to sink my teeth into anything in this movie. And I think to sort of counter Katey a little bit, I did not go with the stage thing at all. Really? I'm just like, yeah, I just don't care. Like, it's just like, it's just not that fascinating to me what's going through this guy's head and like what, it's like, why am I, and this is like the dumbest thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyways because it's what I felt. Why am I supposed to care? Why am I supposed to care about what he's going through and his experiences? Give me something a little bit more. They touched upon it a little bit when he gets released, and then he starts to have that relationship with, who is that person? Is that like, he goes to live with his uncle? Is that his cousin technically? I don't even know. The woman that he's sort of sleeping with in the right. Kind of when he's out, there was just a tug of a real emotional narrative going on there. Just a little bit. He goes to, she's actually going to get married to somebody else. He goes and then, of course, steals a ring and assaults somebody, right, to get the engagement ring or whatever. There's a little bit there. Outside of that, I can't really. I don't know, Chris. Tell me what you sunk your teeth into in this. Like, what's the emotional narrative that you're feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I like that kind of bait and switch. That it makes you feel like you're going to get some kind of attempt at a redemptive narrative, or at the very least, a kind of multifaceted three-dimensional narrative regarding this guy. But then soon as he returns to prison, this is a place where like that does not happen. I kind of feel like this movie is like the antithesis, purposeful antithesis of movie like Shawshank Redemption. You got a guy that has essentially, no second layer to him. What you see is what you get with Bronson, both on the page and on the screen, and perhaps in real life too, though that is perhaps unknowable. And when we come back to prison after that tease of perhaps he's going to like go through some kind of transformation or growth, we're reverted right back to it. I do like this quote from
immediately.
I do like this quote from Refn, because I do think that while I'm not enamored with every aspect of the film, including like perhaps its main thesis about like the correlation between notoriety and fame, and being famous for evil rather than for good, but I think it's interesting, especially considering where the movie ends up with the final act regarding the art teacher kidnapping, which was a true event in Bronson's imprisonment. Refn says, I wanted to make him seem like somebody who'd finally discovered their canvas. He uses his art teacher to create an artwork, and he fulfills himself. He ends up happy, he ends up smiling, but of course the consequence of him reaching his goal, becoming Britain's most famous prisoner, is that he will be incarcerated for the rest of his life. It's an allegory for fame. You gain your fame, but there's a consequence for you and the people around you. I don't know. I think that's succinct and maybe not revolutionary, but still like a very different take on how we treat, based on a true story, media in general, in addition to how we treat the prison system in the Western world.
Going political. I like that. Diving deep into that. I don't know, Katey, what do you think? I mean, do you think like we're like? Is
there a depth to this that I'm seeing, or are you more?
I'm saying that there's not. Right. I want to know. So
I'm curious. Katey thinks. Yeah, be the tiebreaker, please, Katey.
I think I would probably have to go with Daniel. I think. I also I like all the theater. Okay. Like I do like the theater stuff, but I think it's purely from Tom Hardy's performance. Yeah. I just like watching him up there, and like I can see the. I don't know. I can see the attempt at like the more deeper meaning to the film, but I did struggle a lot with understanding his character, and I know he's a real person, but and he's just I think he just wanted that infamy, I suppose. But in the movie, I think most of the time I was just like, why does he keep doing this? And I didn't really, I didn't really understand a whole lot. And I think it, like, as much as I like Tom Hardy's performance, I kept reading Joker into it.
Yeah.
It seemed very Joker-ish, which just obviously put me into a whole different mindset and genre of film.
Yeah.
And I think that didn't really help a whole lot. And I guess finding anything deeper in the film. But yeah, I think
it's interesting too, because it's like, it's supposed to be about a real person, right? They're supposed to be this inspired by a true story, but it's like in all these interviews I come across with Refn, it's sort of like one is like, I basically rewrote it at night while we were shooting because we had so little time to prepare. So there's stuff like that pops up where I'm sort of like, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense. The movie did feel very tight in terms of time, cagey in the way that it's shot. And the writing itself, I think a lot of the disjointed aspect of the narrative, a lot of it's intended, but a lot of it is just sort of means of production and how to shoot something in like 30 days on not a lot of money, and like rewriting it at night as you're shooting it. And I think there's also too, there's another thing that came up. It's like, okay, someone asked in an interview, were you familiar with Charles Bronson before making the film? Refn says, I had no idea who he was, and I still don't really know who he is. I think the movie I made, Bronson, is more about the concept of Charles Bronson because I look at it more as an outsider. For some people, it's more about the actual person, but for me, it's more about the concept of creating somebody who changed his persona because of who he is really.
That's fascinating. I feel like if you do a film about someone, you should know who he is by the end of it. If your answer is that you don't know who he is by the end of, creating this thing, maybe you didn't do your job right.
and that's the thing, though, Chris. Like, how do you? Because it's all about. Because you brought up like exploitation before last episode about true stories. There's something's going on here. And that was going to be my next thing, to dive into the ethics behind this, because there is definitely some questionable stuff about regarding the film even existing at all, regardless of how it was created. But I do still think, I think perhaps one of the reasons why I find myself magnetized to the movie is the fact that I often struggle with, I constantly struggle with movies based on a true story where the storyteller feels like they have some kind of authority on communicating to an audience who this person was, what their life was, because I don't know that that's film as an art form's job. I think that we're exploring concepts way more than we're exploring people, whether they're true or fictional. And I like that the movie very much feels that way, and maybe it's a product of its limitations, like you said, kind of like rewriting to the point of being overwritten in between takes, and Refn being kind of a megalomaniac on the set. Tom Hardy was very upfront in the press circuit about how often the two of them butted heads, sometimes purposely, right, trying to and that's kind of questionable ethically too, but the idea that they wanted to create friction and conflict because that was the basis of the film's subject matter. But regardless, I do think that my admiration for the film is very much conflicted still by the ethics behind it, right? There's tons of quotes from both Bronson himself and the people who made it, and the people who were affected, the victims of Bronson, throughout both his imprisonment and the crimes he committed outside of prison, where consequences faced by Bronson himself because of the film. Hardy, who had, like you said, a pretty consistent relationship with Bronson while preparing for the role and throughout filming of it, once the film's released, Hardy said that he hadn't even seen the film because he had been further subjugated to punishment because of
the release, and all, basically everybody in prison treating him like a celebrity because he was the only one in the prison that had a movie made about him. And he got moved to a higher security prison after that because of the groundswell of support from his fellow inmates. And then there was a message that he had recorded that was played back during the premiere of the film in London, where Bronson himself stated, "I'm proud of the film because if I drop dead tonight, then I live on. As long as my mother enjoys the film, I'm happy. I make no bones about it. I really was a horrible, nasty, violent man. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed of it either, because every punch I've ever flung in my life, I've taken 21 back." And that's
but the whole point of it, like, it's such a tangled web. Because now he's getting famous for a movie being made about him because he's a terrible human being. Right.
He's getting treated. Well, I mean,
it's so ridiculous.
Yeah. It's like an Ouroboros type thing of he wanted so much of this violence in his life, and he wanted all this attention, and sometimes you can easily conflate the two. Sometimes it's hard to have one without the other. Violence and attention are inherently entangled, I think, especially for somebody that spends their life as a fighter, as a prisoner.
Well, it's just no, go ahead.
The last thing I was just going to say is the Prison Officers Association, filed a formal complaint, the only film to have a complaint filed against it by the Prison Officers Association in Britain, accusing it of glorifying violence. You think about all the movies that take place in prison or have prison riots or prison fights in them. This is the only one they ever took issue with.
Yeah, no, totally. It's, kind of like a ridiculous thing to even lodge a complaint against. Man, it's so tough because it's to what you said, like biopics, very postmodern of you, Chris. You're a postmodern person through and through. There's no way to tell a story of somebody. I get it. But they did tell a story of somebody. And this will be how people interpret that person. Millions of people who've seen this movie, maybe tens of thousands, probably millions, are going to interpret this person. So it's on the one hand, he said, Refn says stuff like, I wasn't making a biopic of Michael Peterson. I was making a movie about my own interpretation of the transformation. Yeah. But that's not how it plays out. It plays out. It's called Bronson.
Right. And it's interesting that he keeps using the word transformation when it's ostensibly something that happens off screen before the movie even starts. Right.
Yeah.
And we're just given that. I remember the first time I watched the movie, it was confusing at first because I didn't know any of the backstory. I just clicked on it because of Drive. And I'm like, wait, so is this guy's name Bronson or is his name Michael? It's jarring. And it very much is, like you said, it's a presentation of a particular persona. Because
here's the thing: you could have made a movie about somebody going through the transformation that has nothing to do with this person, Charles Bronson.
Right.
So it's you're talking. It's it is talking about these deeper concepts, but it's within this really polished package of an identity, a singular identity, and then it makes that identity grandiose and famous, and it's sort of, I don't know, it's such a weird sort of tug and pull between trying to be coy about things and, oh, this isn't a biopic, whatever, but at the same time kind of glorifying him, right? On some level. He's walking on a tightrope. I do kind of want to loop back to the biopic statement because I think you dropped an atom bomb there. I want to turn it over to Katey for a second. Katey, what do you think about biopics in general? And do you feel like they're there's something maybe kind of, I don't know, incomplete about the whole idea of trying to make a movie about somebody?
They're not my favorite. They're not my favorite type of movies, especially the musical biopic. I've gotten real tired of. I think I have PTSD from Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh my god!
If my parents ever listen to this, they're gonna be mad at me. For saying
it's totally a mom and dad thing. Biopics, right?
Oh yeah, it's definitely.
But yeah, with this one in particular, he just doesn't feel like a real person.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I struggle with the most throughout it, because you don't again, I said this earlier, but like, I just do not understand why he's doing this. And the point that he's just a violent person inherently, because that's what it feels like. They do that like speed run of his childhood, and he's just beating people up in class in school, like all the time. And that's just sort of like where we start with him. And then at the end, he's just a more violent version of that kid. And yeah, so I'm kind of stuck. I'm stuck there with like not knowing. And also, I think it's kind of weird to do a biopic of someone who's still alive.
Yeah.
Although the exception to this is Rocket Man is one of my favorite movies.
Oh, okay. I still haven't seen that one. So that was going to be my follow-up question, actually, is like, what makes for a good biopic? So I'm hearing Rocket Man from Katey. What would you say is a quality biopic, Dan?
Oh my God. Now you're putting me on the spot. I don't know. I have no idea if there's a good biopic out there. I can't even think of one. I generally hate them. Pretty much across the board, because like, to your point, it's like trying to encapsulate one person in one film is literally impossible, right? There's just no way. You can do stuff like reflect on their cultural importance in a film and kind of reflect that back on people and be like, oh, this person was really important. They did a lot of great things. But yeah, it's a very tough genre to get even remotely right. I mean, the thing is, it's catnip for older people. It always has been. I mean, growing up, think about in the 90s and like early 2000s, and when, the box office was a little bit different and movies were a lot bigger, the business was just larger. I think there had to be like 12 a year, and they're always, released in December to get the Oscar nominations and stuff like that. It's kind of, I think, dropped off significantly since that heyday. But I think it is a very specific art form. I look at something like, one that I did like, I guess you call this I guess it's a biopic, I, Tonya, with Margot Robbie, Tanya Harding, and all that that whole thing. I really enjoyed that because it didn't really feel like it was trying to tell the life of someone's entire story. It was trying to tell kind of a vignette of their life almost.
Of like a specific event, like in that case.
Yeah, specific event. It just felt more, grounded. I don't know. I mean, when you look over at TV, like what's the Ryan Murphy thing that he does, like OJ, American Crime Story,
right,
stuff like that. Like, it's brutal because it's so engaging. It's such an engaging sort of, oh, this really happened. Let me see the drama of it. But there is an inherent, one, exploitation, and two, lie. Right? Yeah. It's like trying to represent reality on screen is impossible. Right? It's art. It's not real. And so, I think, and this is a movie that goes, hits at the heart of that conflict, where it tries to do both. Hey, this is art. This isn't real. But at the same time, it's about Charles Bronson, this crazy guy who's real. And then the back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Some movies do well with that tension. I don't think Bronson's one of them. But like, I think I think there is an inherent sort of weakness in saying, hey, I'm making a movie about a single person's life, and this is a reflection of who they are. It's ultimately always going to fail. Speaking of failures, can we talk about the third one?
Did you plan that segue, Dan? That's one of our better ones in a while.
Let's talk about the terminal.
Okay.
Come on. Speaking of like true life, but you intro it.
Well, I was going to say, I picked this for two specific reasons. One, because it fit with the theme of our cycle pretty perfectly. Like, it is one of the but despite the fact that it is like a whimsical Spielberg, mid-career flick, it is very much a bizarre true story. And yes, it's changed incredible amount for this rendition. But also, I had to go back and see it, I felt, because The Fabelmans was one of my favorite movies of last year.
Oh man, you're becoming old. This is great.
And I was just so curious, like, because I had thought that I was like done with Spielberg. I was like, I haven't liked one of his movies in years. And then The Fabelmans comes along and reminds me of all the things I like about him, or I did like about him, especially when I was younger.
I haven't seen it yet. I got to see it.
Oh my God, you have to see it. It's unlike any film, and yet it's like every single one of his films. Anyway,
well, I'm a huge Spielberg apologist, and you've known me to be this way.
And that was that was tied into this as well. So I know that.
Yeah,
it was the first time watch for me. It was the first time watch for Katey. Tell us about your history with The Terminal.
Oh, my history? It's not a very long one. The first time I saw it was 3 months ago or 2 months ago.
Okay, wait.
So I live with my good friend Pippa. She's like, I love this movie. Let's watch it. And so I watched it and I was like, oh, okay. And then you announced it for the podcast. And I was like, oh, I need to rewatch this to really focus on it. And, I love Spielberg. I loved Bridge of Spies. Yeah, I know. I sound like I'm an 80-year-old man. It was one of my favorite movies that year. It was like 2015. I love a lot of his work. Not all of it. I hated AI. Yeah, I know. I'm crazy. I don't know, Katey, what did you think about it? Because this is your first time ever seeing this.
And also, I want to know your history with Spielberg too, Katey.
Well, I guess the history with Spielberg. Obviously, I've always known who he was, and so I like his movies. I don't think they've ever been like my favorite ones, but they're like iconic. So I'm aware of that. The Fabelmans, I was just kind of on. I think it was like, okay, it's a Spielberg movie. But I actually didn't realize The Terminal was a Spielberg movie until the credits started rolling, and then
that's amazing.
when I saw his name pop up, I was like, "Oh, wait!" It was like one of those things where I was like, "Wait, I think I knew that actually," but like while I was watching it, I wasn't thinking of Spielberg, so it was like one of those things. I knew about this movie though. I think because when Andor was on, I was watching a lot of Diego Luna interviews. And so I saw in some interviews him talking about this movie. So I kind of knew it from that. And I remember the news story back in November of the guy that this movie is inspired by died last November. So I remember that news story. So I was aware of what this movie was going into it. And I really liked it. There's like some parts of it that I think are kind of dated. And actually, watching everyone in this in the airport terminal and no one wearing a mask was giving me like major anxiety. That was one of the things. But as far as like the central story, it is like, I know it's slightly different from The Real Guy, I think, but it is sort of a fantastical idea of like someone living out of an airport, because an airport is sort of like this microcosm of the real world, because you have all these like shops and places you can go to, and then plus with all of the comings and goings of everyone in the world practically, it does kind of feel that. And I think this movie captured that like fantastical idea around it really well, and I liked those aspects of it. It's
kind of like a snow globe world that he created. What's crazy too is they actually didn't film this in an airport. They built an airport terminal from scratch, which is like mind-blowing. This movie basically cost what? Yeah, $60 million. I think it was like it's $100 million in today's money. So there's definitely like, and I think that the thing that I did enjoy about the movie is the interactions between Victor and the airport staff and those friendships that he develops. I mean, that's kind of like, look, it's Spielberg, so it's very sweet. It's saccharine, and it plays well and it's watchable. And I think that like some people in the reviews have pointed out, the casting was terrible or the casting's great. It's kind of both. Like, I feel like the side characters were cast very well. I love Stanley Tucci as sort of like the airport main
He
cop
commits.
or whatever. Well, yeah, exactly. He's full into this movie, and he really inhabits his role. And I think he's great. I don't know about Tom Hanks in the main role. I think I think that's where I struggle with the story a little bit. I'm just sort of like, I don't know. It just he doesn't. He's a wonderful actor, and I love Tom Hanks. I love Tom Hanks in like 90% of the stuff that he does. In this one, I couldn't buy that he was someone from some nondescript. Also, why are we doing a nondescript fake country? That's a whole other thing. It's hard to buy him as that person. And I think the love interest and stuff like that didn't really make a whole lot of sense. But I mean, it's Spielberg in the sense that like it's impeccably crafted. Like it really is. He is such a good meat and potatoes filmmaker. He gets how to bring things to life on screen. You know, and I compare this to like on our last episode we did Cocaine Bear, which just came out like a month ago. And one of our criticisms there was that nothing felt alive on screen. Everything was so flat and so lifeless. And you're just like, ugh. Spielberg is the exact opposite. Like he could literally film anything, a commercial for a car or whatever, and it would feel cinematic just because he has a certain sort of vision and talent. To me, it's just like the story and some of the casting, specifically Tom Hanks, just didn't really, and I think the script in general just didn't feel rich enough to me to like, I don't know, to love it. I'm kind of like meh on it. I don't know, Chris. I mean, what do you, and then the changes to the story are tough because the true story is way sadder. Like way sadder than this.
Right.
I don't know. I'm blabbling at this point, Chris.
The way that I thought about this episode as we were preparing for it is that we were going to cover a movie about an imprisoned man who maniacally chooses all the wrong things to do at every possible juncture in his life. And the other one's called Bronson.
You're so ridiculous.
I'm so sorry. I despise this film.
No.
I was losing my mind every scene because of that inherent conflict. Like you're right on. The world that is created is so easy and fluffy, and like I want to be in there, and like he's clearly doing the classic like Spielberg watching tons of Frank Capra, and he specifically calls out Capra and in his press junket stuff for the movie, and you know that all the fake country kind of plays into that too, this very kind of old Hollywood feel to it, right? That's kind of a vibe that I think worked a lot better for another kind of Stranger Than Fiction based on a true story movie that he made just a couple of years prior, Catch Me If You Can. But in this one, it's so like he clearly he just wanted to make another movie with Tom Hanks, and in this time he wanted Tom in the lead role instead of the supporting one. And this was the one that came across DreamWorks' desk, and you know, because he's 1/3 of DreamWorks, arguably the most powerful third, he's like, this is the one that I want to make, and my buddy Tom wants to be the lead role. Doesn't matter at all that like. I don't know. I see every scene and I'm like, this is not a person. This is Tom Hanks in an SNL skit playing an Eastern European
that's brutal.
guy.
You're being harsh.
I know. I'm so sorry. But
He felt more like a person to me than Bronson did, though.
There we go. I agree with Katey.
But I also agree that like every time I struggled with like him learning English.
Yeah.
Because I was like, Tom Hanks speaks English. And so I didn't buy him like I was really thrown off and like questioning, okay, which words is he actually like the character picking up and like what is he not picking up? I don't know. That I hated that part of it, and like definitely took me out of the story a lot. And I don't really like Tom Hanks in this role either. It's more of like all the side people in the airport that I like. I don't like the love story either.
The love story felt flat to me for some reason. I don't know why. Is it like maybe a lack of chemistry between her and it's not believable to me that a flight attendant is just going to, I don't know, like fall in love with a random dude in the airport. I feel like they just never want to be in the airport. You know?
Not just like fall in love with him, but like constantly pursue him. And
like, I don't see the way that they wrote her. I kind of find a little bit of, I don't know.
It is offensive.
Okay. I just want to say it felt a little offensive to me just because of like, I don't know. I don't care. What do you think?
I was irritated at the end when she was upset about him. Wait, hang on. Now I can't remember if she like, oh shit. I just finished watching this last night. Hang on.
She ultimately leaves him, right?
Well, I was irritated that she seemed to be like more mad that he lied to her and not the fact that he's literally stuck in a airport, not a prison, an airport. But I can't remember if she actually knew that. That's what I can't remember. But anyway, I do remember being irritated by that. I was like, okay, this isn't about you. Because like I forget who said this earlier, but the real story is really sad. And but in this story too, like it's still sad that he like can't leave because of this like weird loophole that he fell into at like the right at like the right moment when he was in the air. And that part's like really sad. And I think for her to like, you know, not be more focused on like being shot down multiple times irritated me.
If this movie wasn't made in 2004, I would make the claim that Catherine Zeta-Jones and Tom Hanks filmed their scenes separately and it was composited.
Like that Jonah Hill movie that just came out.
Exactly.
The true story is really sad. I mean, it's truly like the guy, Nassari from Iran he's Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. It kind of did happen this way. He just did not have papers, couldn't prove where he was from.
Right.
People didn't know what to do with him. He's kind of passed back and forth, but he's always staying at the airport. He does get out in 2006 because he's sick and he's hospitalized and moved to a homeless shelter in Paris. Mm-hmm. And so he's basically granted permission to stay in France on humanitarian grounds. But he lives a reclusive life still because during this time period, because of his poor health. And then eventually he goes back to the airport right before he dies, and he dies in the airport.
Yeah.
I mean, like, in the place that he lived most of his adult life to some degree. It's almost like I want David Lynch to film The Terminal. Right. You know, I want that story because there's something really compelling is probably not the right word. There's something really sad, but there's something very interesting about someone who chooses to do that.
Right.
Ultimately, this movie makes it look like, it's this bureaucratic nightmare, and he can't. That's not really how it played out, though. You know,
it's actually not that dissimilar from the story of Bronson. You could make the argument that this guy, got stuck in this cycle in prison, and it became more comfortable for him to commit violent acts in order to stay there because that's what he was used to and comfortable doing. And that's essentially the true story of Nassiri. Like, it was even said that when he got the $250,000 to sell his story to Spielberg, he quote, became a bit richer, but also became more paranoid and confused because then people started like acknowledging him as the source material IRL for this, quirky Spielberg comedy. That in itself is also sad. So like,
it's just like, I mean, you're right. It's a really good parallel when I'm thinking about it. It's like this guy could have left. There were multiple points where the authorities were like, yeah, you can go. Like, you gotta do this or do that. And he wouldn't do it. Right. And it's like, it's, maybe they're both movies really about mental illness. Right.
There you go.
Especially The Terminal. I mean, not the Tom Hanks character, but the actual story. Yeah. It's just sort of like, that's a sad take. And, I think even in the interviews, to some degree, Spielberg distances himself from the real story. Again, it's that walking that tightrope. Yes. Hey, this is a real story, but it's not. It's not a real story.
Yeah, I know.
It's not that story. It's not a biopic, right? And I don't know. I mean, I think with this one, there could have been a really interesting story and compelling story told about this man who's going through this and sort of the prison of, I don't know what you call it, indecision, the prison of feeling stuck in between places and countries and nations and identities. There's something really, there could be an awesome film made about that, but that doesn't really happen here, right? This is Spielberg to me, kind of phoning it in. Even when Spielberg is phoning it in, it's like, it's still pretty good. It's still an interesting watch.
Still watchable, yeah,
because he's so good at filmmaking, right? Yeah. He can make anything look interesting and cool, or warm, I should say.
Go ahead, Katie. Yeah.
Okay. Really, I just remembered something that also really I did not like, and it was even though I like the side characters a lot, the Diego Luna's character and Zoe Saldana's character getting married.
God. What the hell is that?
Wait a second, I like that part.
They had not one conversation with each other.
I thought that was pretty weird. Yeah,
that was when she I did like that she was a Trekkie and it was Zoe Saldana. Like, I love that. But when she accepted his proposal, I was like, what? No way.
By proxy of Tom Hanks.
They'd never talked before?
I think it's implied that they hadn't.
Yeah, right. I think you're right. I almost felt like the scene where they're driving off in the cart or whatever with all the, just married sign on the back, whatever. I was like, I felt like something had been cut from the film. Like their scenes had been cut where they were supposed to talk to each other and court each other and date, that whole thing. But maybe not. Maybe it was just sort of like
the 2000s were wild, man. There was so many romantic plots in whether they were proper romantic comedies or not.
But that's like an old trope, though.
Yeah, that was an old Hollywood thing too, right?
That's a very old trope from I want to say post World War II or something. It kind of went away in the 60s and 70s, but I feel like in a movie in the 40s and 50s, you would definitely see people courting each other and not really talking, and then just getting married.
Yep.
But not the finest moment.
It got a little sad there talking about the real guy the movie's based on. Can we end on a happy note with some trivia?
Sure, let's do trivia.
Okay, let me set this up for our guest, Katie. I've got 5 descriptions of movies from the 2000s, some of which really exist and some of which do not, and it's up to you and Dan to decide whether they are real or fake. Okay?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. We're going to start in the year 2000. The directorial debut of iconic 90s actor Lily Taylor, who also stars. This film centers on the 1992 true story of Emmanuel Del Vecchio, a former flight attendant turned ambitious entrepreneur from Rhode Island who opened a drive-through store called Condom Hut to the outrage of the moralistic, uber-religious townspeople that vandalized and mounted political pressure to close the establishment. An examination of the cross-section between capitalism and Puritanism, the film opened to rave reviews but only made $20,000 at the box office.
So we're guessing whether that was an actual film or Chris made that up.
Yeah.
Katie, I'm gonna let you guess. You're the guest. You go first. Is that a real movie or no?
Yes.
What do you think, Dan?
I'm gonna say yes too.
That one's fake. I made that one up.
Oh, man, you're getting really good at this.
Thank you.
There was so much detail in that. I was for sure.
Yeah, I go a little extra.
He goes way too extra.
If that movie existed, I would call it Protests and Prophylactics, and it can be optioned Hollywood from yours truly for a meager $20,000. And I promise that if you put it straight to streaming on Hulu, you won't have to worry about ticket sales. Okay, next one, 2002.
So okay.
From Gadfly auteur Paul Schrader comes the morbid true story of clean-cut Hogan's Heroes actor Bob Crane, played by Greg Kinnear, and his struggle with sex addiction, which leads to recording intimate encounters with his partners without his partner's consent. And finally, accusations of murdering his best friend and partner in crime, played by Willem Dafoe. With music by Twin Peaks maestro Angelo Badalamenti and controversy stirred up by Crane's son claiming the film to be wholly inaccurate, it's moderately surprising that this movie has yet to be reclaimed or at least reassessed by the Letterboxd community.
Ooh. Katie, what do you think?
Yes.
I'm gonna say yes too. I feel like I remember this movie.
You guys got this. Yeah. The movie's called Autofocus. It made 2.7 mil on a $7 million budget. It had a working title of Take Off Your Clothes and Smile. It's a bad film. And I'm a Paul Schrader apologist. 2002.
Okay, interesting.
Greg Kinnear loves his Stranger Than Fiction biopics, right?
He does.
Talked about Heaven is Real for the last one. Okay, 2005. You guys are 1 for 2 so far. From the director of the original 1973 Wicker Man, none other than John Malkovich portrays Alan Conway, a British con man who gained notoriety in the early 90s for convincing his marks to dole out cash, liquor, and sex in exchange for parts in internationally renowned filmmaker Stanley Kubrick's next film. With 5 original songs co-written by Bryan Adams and a script by Kubrick's own personal assistant, Anthony Fruin, it's not terribly surprising that the forgotten film received a lukewarm response from critics, many calling it a, quote, one-note comedy without much insight.
This is really hard, man. These are really hard. Katie, what do you think?
I'm going to say no.
I'm going to say no, too. It feels fake to me.
It's real.
God, how is that movie real?
Yeah, the Wicker Man guy made
assistant. That sounds like you just made that up on the spot.
It's a movie called Color Me Kubrick, 2005.
God, I don't remember that at all.
No.
We're like 1 for 3 now. Okay,
yeah, 1 for 3. 1 for 3.
I got like 2 right last time.
Correct, 2 out of 5 last time.
Brutal. Okay.
2006. From Oscar darling Lasse Hallström, the man behind Cider House Rules, What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and Chocolat, it's a surprise that this film, retelling the life and exploits of investigative reporter Clifford Irving, played by Richard Gere, who fooled several major publishers with false claims of having ghostwritten eccentric billionaire Howard Hughes' autobiography, didn't go on to win many awards. The book goes as far as becoming a worldwide bestseller before anyone of power and persuasion realizes that Irving fabricated hundreds of pages worth of information about Hughes. He then went on to write a book about how he fooled everybody, and that became a bestseller as well.
Okay, what do you got? True or false?
True. I'm just making up answers. I don't know.
Yeah, this is very difficult. I'm gonna say false.
Katie's right in this one. That movie exists. It's called The Hoax. It's got a 70 out of 100 on Metacritic. Gere got a satellite nomination, and supporting actor Alfred Molina got a London Film Critics Circle nomination, but otherwise was largely ignored come awards season.
It just goes to show you, imagination, truth, it's all the same thing. All right, what's the last one?
Yeah. Oh, so that was 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Okay. So the last one.
Yeah, last one.
2009. From film geek favorites, filmmaker Werner Herzog and producer David Lynch, comes a true crime drama starring Michael Shannon as Brad McCullum, a mentally unstable stage actor that becomes obsessed with and lost in a role he's preparing for in a Greek tragedy, which results in murdering his mother and holding his neighbors from across the street hostage, one of whom he agrees to let go to the lead detective, played by Willem Dafoe, in exchange for pizza. The film explores McCullum's life leading up to the salacious news item, 70% of which Herzog revealed in the press tour to be completely made up.
Katie, what do you think?
I'm going to go no.
I'm going to say false as well.
That movie exists.
God, this is impossible.
It's called My Son, What Have Ye Done? It received a limited release.
This is not true. You're lying to me right now. The way you said pizza, it sounded like a lie.
This is the only one I've actually seen of the 5.
Wow.
It's an insane movie. Ebert said that the film, quote, confounds all convention and denies all expected pleasures.
I feel like Michael Shannon's up for anything. He's
Absolutely.
One of those actors. He's like, yeah, let's just do it. Pay me pizza and I'll act for you.
I can't believe how many movies there are out there that I just have never heard of.
Yeah,
no, it's insane.
There's so many.
So I think that means you were 2 for 5 again, Dan, right? And
I think I was 2 for 5, yeah.
And Katie was 3 for 5. Yeah, so good work, Katie.
You're the winner.
Thank you so much, Katie, for joining us on this ridiculous episode of Film Trace.
Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. What do you got going on? What any new articles, any new podcast stuff coming on?
Yes, I meant to mention this earlier, but InBetweenDrafts has a newsletter, which is super new. It's on Substack.
Nice.
But also if if you go follow me on Twitter, which is at Katey Pretzel, and also Katey is Katey, not a traditional spelling of Katie, so I have to mention it. There is a link to the Substack there, which is like weekly roundups of all of our content on Fridays. There's also a paid option if you feel so inclined, which will get you exclusive content from the editors.
Nice.
So yeah, you can go check that out, and also check out the website as well. But the March has a bunch of TV out this month, and our TV section has been killing it on the coverage. So definitely go check out the TV section on InBetweenDrafts.com.
Very
Definitely
cool.
Good reads on there. Thank you so much, Katey.
What do we got coming up next? We got the 90s, right? We got Fair and Lovely in Las Vegas, which I just rewatched last week. Ooh,
I've been trying to put off my rewatch of that one.
Good luck with that. And then Heavenly Creatures is the Chaser movie, and we're going to have the guys from their Too Many Movies on the next episode. Thanks for listening. This has been Film Trace.